So I've been getting a lot of requests recently to make a video on my editing style, and I'm really excited to finally be able to share that with you today. So today I'm going to be going over a few photos shot on my Fujifilm X100F and how I edit them in Lightroom. I want to start this video off by saying that editing is certainly just a portion of the photography process. It is something that a lot of photographers do like to fixate on, and it's something I've spent a lot of time getting into and learning about. But I do want to stress that, like, any photo that you take, no matter what it is, like, editing's certainly not going to save it. If the photo is poorly composed and is out of focus or is underexposed or overexposed, technically wrong, then editing it might make it better, but it's definitely not going to save it. And I want to stress that. So, like, editing is definitely a compliment to your work in the past and your work on the shoot days. So yeah, don't try and fixate and think that editing's the whole about photography, because it really isn't. And also, how I go about editing these photos, like, this is how I do it. It's not really the correct way, I'm sure. I've never done any classes. I'm self-taught. I watched all the YouTube videos as well to, like, teach myself. So I wouldn't really worry about how exactly I've done things. But what you are interested in is, I'm sure, the coloring and different ways I get the look. So that's what I'll be going over today. And yeah, stoked to have you here. So without wasting any more time, let's jump into Lightroom and get started. So now that we're in Lightroom, I'm gonna be going over this image right here. I captured this image when I was in a national park. It's called the Cape Legrand National Park. You can see it in another video, but this is one of the images I captured at sunrise on, like, our third day. So it is one of my favorites, and I'm gonna go over with this with you. And so to show you the first image, this is what I put out to the world that you would have seen. So I'm going to re-edit it and show you every step I made and why and all the reasons in between. So to get started, I usually like to start with the crop tool. With an image like this, composition is pretty important. So I'm gonna bring it down to 8.5 by 11, and I'm gonna bring it in just a tad. I want the mountain and the car to line up pretty nicely. Just looking at that right now, it's looking a lot better than just the original cropping that I had done. So here, I'm actually gonna move it a bit more, and yeah, I'm really happy with that. So to start off, profile wise, I'm gonna use Adobe Color. I can always use the Fujifilm's inbuilt settings, because this was shot on the X100F. So if you go down to camera matching, we can play around with the classic chrome, the Astia, the Pro Neg, and from there. But to be honest, I'm just going to stick with the Adobe Color on this one. I might just move that over a tad, sorry. Okay, so next, what I like to do with a lot of my images, as I'm sure you know, is to brighten them up. So I'm going to bring up the overall exposure of the image quite a bit, maybe by just under 1 stop. So you can already see that this image is pretty cold. It was on a morning, like the sunrise, the light hasn't really hit the whole scene. So that's why I want to bring it up, brighten it up, but not too much, because yeah, this was at sunrise and I do want to kind of preserve that shadow there. So we're going to keep contrast away for now. I'll handle that later. Bring the highlights down so some of those clouds can come up as well. So next I'm going to bring up the shadows. That's just to bring that foreground into the image and really balance it out. If we brought it down, it'd be a bit too contrasty for my look. So I'm going to bring that up to about there. All right, next I'm gonna bring my whites down. I just like doing this. I can't really tell you why, but I think it really softens up the image as well as bringing up the black. So it kind of gives a bit more of a flat, soft look, which I really like. And again, clarity wise, I always drop that. Don't know why, it's what I've been doing for a while, and I really like the look. I feel the opposite is just a bit too sharp and not really my kind of style, but down is what I like to do, but not by too much usually, because I like to preserve the focus and quality of the image. So next, I always bring up my vibrance. This is something I got onto a while back now, and I'm really loving how it kind of subtly brings up the colors compared to saturation. That looks horrendous if you ask me, so I might give it a little bit, but usually I wouldn't touch saturation. I would usually just bring up the vibrance. And that's a tool that I feel a lot of photographers neglect, and something I'd recommend. So this is what I'd go. Now, looking at this image, it does look a bit cold. Yes, it was the morning, but I would like to bring up the warmth of it a little bit, just like that. And I think compared to the original, this is what we've done so far. Okay, so now moving on to the tone curve. This is where most of my work happens, and this is where I like to do the most adjusting. So to start off with, I'm gonna bring up the midtones. Let's just brighten up the middle of the image. And then next, I'm gonna bring down the shadows, bit of contrast there. Hence why I didn't really touch the contrast earlier. I like to handle it here. So bring that down. And now also, this image is quite nice to pop the highlights a bit. So I'm gonna do that just a little bit there. You can see in the sky and around the mountain how that's been affected. So that's where we're at. And they're usually the basic adjustments. I don't clip my blacks. I like to keep them pretty natural. So yeah, I might just bring up the exposure a tad. And that's what we're dealing with. You can kind of see here how the shadows, there's a bit of noise around the car. We can deal with that later. That's just the Fujifilm in low light. So moving on to the colors. So you can see a lot of greens and yellows and blues. I really want to make the yellows a bit more orange. So I'm going to push that over. The reason for that is that I love the complementary style of like orange and blue. So I don't want to bring it too much, make it look unnatural, because this was like a spring kind of morning. So just a tad. And the same with the greens. I'd like to keep them there. They're pretty good there. And as well as the orange, see, that would just look weird, and then that would just look fake. So if we bring that back to 0, I'm pretty happy with where they're at. So I might just bring it down a portion there. Moving on. Oh, the blue hue, that looks a bit purple, and that looks a bit by my preset vibe. So I'm not about that. I'm just gonna leave that where they are, because actually that's pretty clean and nice. Moving on to the saturation. I don't think we need to really do a lot here. I kind of like the colors the way they are. I might bring it up a tad, but outside of that, not too much is going to be adjusted. The blues potentially there. We can always drop them down and go for a really desaturated look, but I think the colors just work really well together, so I'm going to keep that there. Finally, luminance. Again, I do want to bring the blues up a bit and soften up the image. That is just a little habit of mine I've had with particular colors. I either bring them up if they're complementary, and also I like to bring them down, but I feel like too far down just looks a bit weird. Like that doesn't look very nice. So a little bit up, and yeah, that's our original, and then that is our finished copy. So moving down the toolbar here, I do like to sharpen up my images. So not too much. I like 50, 55 range. And out of habit, I do put this at about 4 or 5. I can't tell you why, it's what I do. Moving down, I'll always make sure that your lens corrections are made. So we'll just do that quickly. And yeah, overall, image-wise, really happy with this. So we can look at the original, and that is what we've got. And then this is our new version. And look, I might even bring that up just a tad, but one thing I mentioned at the start is about the noise around the car. So we can always come in with a brush here and adjust. I don't usually do this with all my photos, but we can certainly bring the clarity down. I found that bringing the clarity down and upping the sharpness is a nice way to bring out, get rid of some noise, but keep a bit of sharpness obviously in your image, because just clarity alone kind of makes it look like it's just blown and washed out. So that looks a little nicer in my opinion. But yeah, that is that image. And if we go to the right, I think you'll be able to see my original edit that I shared with all of you. So this was the original, and then this is the one that we just re-edited. So pretty similar. And yeah, that's how I handled that image. So again, this was shot on the X100F. So we do have the option to use some of the profiles that come in the camera. I did use a classic chrome style with this at one point, but I did find in the end that the Adobe color offered a bit more pop that I was chasing. So anyway, if we jump right in, what I'm gonna do again is sort out the crop. So another 8.5 by 11, and I'm just gonna hit the letter O on my keyboard to cycle through a few different cropping tools. So I'm gonna stick with this one, the classic thirds. So what I like to do when I crop my images is get rid of distractions. So if you see this is a distraction, this is a distraction, the handles, the edges, it doesn't look very clean and sharp. So I like to just bring things in as tight as possible. So you can see around the edge, like it's just the car now and the window, not the weird edges. So that's what I like to do. Next, I definitely need to straighten up the horizon and monitor that window because that's twisting back in now. I do struggle with the horizon sometimes, but that looks pretty on board because the Adobe Auto doesn't always work and you shouldn't rely on it. So it's handy if it does work, but I rarely find it getting it perfect. So kind of need to go off your eye there. But anyway, like usual, I'm gonna jump into the exposure and bring up the overall exposure of the image. This image is quite flat. This was sunrise. There wasn't a lot of contrast in the scene yet. So gonna be careful about how much we bring that up. Same deal, again, gonna keep the contrast a bit low and at 0 for now, and we'll see if we need to adjust it later. So highlights, we're gonna bring them down. There's some clouds in the distance there that offer a nice balance to this image. So I'm gonna bring them down, or bring the highlights down so we can see the clouds there. Next, shadows. So this image is heavily in the shadows, but I don't wanna go too much because that just looks off. So bring it up just a tad. Same with the whites, gonna bring them down and push up the blacks. That little combo of white, black, I don't know why I do it with my travel photos. I just like the look of it. There's no real explanation there. So again, gonna bring the clarity down. And most people, you'd look at this, is an awfully flat image. Like I mentioned, I do all my work mainly in the tone curve. And again, vibrant straight up. Beautiful colors you can see coming through. So I really wanna take advantage of that. And again, saturation, ever so slightly, if at all. So +6 for now, but we might bring that back down. Okay, now moving on to the tone curve. I'm gonna raise up the mids just a tad and then really bring in those shadows there. So that's brought back a lot of that contrast that we're talking about. And now highlights wise, I'm gonna pop that up as well. And I'm really liking the look of this. I might, in this case, bring this up just a tad. Traditional S-curve, but the midtones are kind of pushed up a bit because yeah, the image was awfully flat and I didn't want to make it too contrasty. So now, the HSL sliders. Now we've got a lot of greens and blues. So starting off with the blues, I really want to bring them up in the image. It's a really nice ocean and the sky is very soft, so I want to play with that. In terms of the hue, I think blue would be pretty comfortable at 0 there. The green, so the greens is going to deal with our car as well as the yellow because you can kind of tell they're quite linked. So I'm going to push the yellows a bit towards the greens. That's what the car looked like in real life. I don't want to make it look like it wasn't, so push that up as well. And same deal with the saturation, going to bring that up as well. You will find often that sometimes greens and yellows, they're obviously going to mix, so if we bring up the yellows, we're going to get a lot of that coming up in this image. So this is looking good color-wise. It still looks really soft and cold, like quite cool image. So I'm going to actually bring up the white balance a tad. And that's going to bring back a bit of warmth into the image, kind of that sunrise look we're going to deal with. And it's here that we can play with some more luminance. But to be honest, what I like to do is go back and forward. Like it doesn't need to be and you don't need to use all the sliders, so just use what you need to use. And in this case, like I'm finding that this is looking quite good already. If we look at the original, and then this is the edited version. So, okay, let's bring in some sharpening. So again, 55 to 60 is where I kind of stick, and noise reduction about 3 or 4. That obviously doesn't do a lot. If you bring it all the way up, you'll be able to see it looks so soft now, which isn't really a vibe. So you can even try 10 today. Now, if you're pedantic, you can go in and spot remove a lot of these things, but to be honest, I think it kind of adds to the car and the storyline involved. So it's kind of a rustic look. Let's fix the profile corrections there. And I have added grain in the past to an image like this, but I'm really liking the clean look of this. So going back up, now we can play a bit more with the contrast, but this is what this image overall is looking quite nice in my opinion. It's very soft. The greens and the blues, yes, they aren't complementary, but I feel they look quite good together. So if we look at the original and then we look at the edited version, you'll be able to see a bit there. I still think that the greens could do with a bit of pop. So we can use the yellow there as well as the green. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this image. And if we look at the original that I would have shown, it's pretty similar. It looks like the greens and the blues are just a tad more brighter, as well as the overall image. But to be honest, like this is how I did it on the day and how I'm doing it now. So they're pretty bang on if you ask me. So this image was definitely one of my favorites. It's a really cool look, and yeah, like I mentioned, I don't usually need to touch all the sliders, but this is the pretty standard approach that I take with the majority of my images. I really flatten them out, then bring it into the tone curve, and then you can see that that does most of the work. I did find using the tone curve when I started a real challenge. So have a play. Obviously a mouse and moving it with your hand like that is a bit of a challenge. I've heard the iPads are awesome at that, so could be an option for you. But for now, play around with the tone curve and yeah, you can kind of get your images looking the way you want them to. But this is what this image looked like at the beginning and now and after the edit. So I hope this video helped shed some light on how I go about editing photos, guys. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is just how I do it, and it's certainly not the best way, I'm sure. There's probably better ways, more efficient ways to use Lightroom, but this is how I use it, and this is how I get my photos to look the way they do. Guys, I want to thank you for watching this video and for requesting this video. And if you have any more requests, please ask for more, because it's really nice just getting ideas about videos to make. So be sure to message me or comment below. And if you haven't subscribed or liked and done all that fancy stuff, that would be awesome if you could. But yeah, look forward to seeing you in the next one.